Hello, I'm Bruce Lorincz, and this show is called Bruce on the Loose, and I talk to a lot of people in the Wadsworth community, both educators and workers for the City of Wadsworth, etc., and to give information for our community on the many aspects of our community. A previous show, I had the new high school principal, Vincent Suber, on, and he talked about his philosophy and the way he's going to approach the high school principalship. And you might take that show in from time to time, and other wonderful shows with Roger Wright and some other folks as well. Daniel Chafin, the new police chief of the City of Wadsworth, joins us today, and I appreciate it. Congratulations, Chief, on your new assignment.
Thanks, sir.
Why don't you tell me and our viewing audience when you first thought you wanted to be a police officer?
You could probably go back to me playing in the backyard or in the basement playing cops and robbers, just like probably a lot of people that are in law enforcement. But obviously over the course of growing up, going to school, I had an interest in public service. My mom and dad are both public servants. My dad's a fire chief. My mom worked in the schools for 30 years. But there's something about law enforcement. You get an opportunity to interact with the community, really help people, and have an impact in a real way. So again, I could probably go back to when I was a little kid, playing cops with the neighbors and your friends. But as you watch and you see, whether it's my dad on the fire department and interacting with other members of law enforcement, and you see really what they get to do day in and day out and how they get to have an impact, and that just continues to push that desire. And I'm very glad that I'm here at the City of Wadsworth, and very glad to have had the opportunity to work in law enforcement, and I am grateful for that.
Chief, what about your educational background?
Sure. So I went to the University of Akron. My degree is it's called Social Sciences PPE, and the PPE stands for Political Science, Philosophy, and Economics.
What about the police academy? A lot of people certainly must attend that. What type of skills are acquired there?
Sure. So I was fortunate enough to attend the Ohio State Highway Patrol Basic Police Academy, so down in Columbus. So that particular academy was residential. You live there during the week, and it is more of a paramilitary setup. So the academy is going to cover all your basic stuff as an officer. So you're going to learn about the law, you're going to learn about case law and how you actually apply the law in real life. You may start to learn a little bit about some basic procedures and tactics. You may learn how to conduct a traffic stop, but then you're also going to get into some of the other skill sets. So you're going to have firearms training, you're going to have driving training, you're going to have defensive tactics training, and you really start to get a better idea of the basic principles in law enforcement. But even when that's done, you're not ready to be an officer just yet. So when I came back to Wadsworth after being in the academy, we started our own field training program, which was about 14 weeks long here. And that's when you get paired up with an officer. You actually are out on the road. You are experiencing calls, in real time with essentially a coach riding shotgun, making sure that you're doing the right thing and doing the right things at the right time. And that's when you really start to learn about what it takes and what you have to do to be an officer.
Why did you apply for the Chief of Police in Wadsworth?
That's a great question. So, law enforcement plays a critical role in the community. And obviously over the course of the last year and a half, there's been a lot of attention brought to law enforcement, a lot of questions about what role the police should have in the community, how that role is implemented. And at the same time, nothing changed about that work. That work is still important. It's still a critical component of a good, healthy community. So I wanted to sort of put my name in the ring there, and the idea behind that was, I think anytime there's a great challenge, whether it's in law enforcement right now or any field, whenever there's a time of challenge, that means there's a time for opportunity, and there's a time to really sort of help set and shape, what law enforcement looks like. What it means to have a successful community policing program, what it means to really have high caliber, high quality men and women that are serving the community. And so obviously I thought that I might be able to help shape that, help grow that, develop that. And fortunately enough for myself, I was given that opportunity, and I take that opportunity very seriously. And I view that opportunity as I'm not the one that's out there anymore. I'm not the one that's handling the calls. I'm not out there in the heat. I'm not out there in the cold. I'm not the one that's putting myself in harm's way. It's the men and women that make up our department. So really now I view myself as a facilitator. It's my job to make sure that they have the training, the resources, and what they need to do that job day in and day out.
Who is your direct supervisor?
So my direct supervisor is Matt Hiscock. He is the public safety director. Myself and the fire chief both report to him at the city.
Okay, what about, we mentioned for a few seconds before about mentors. Why are mentors important for our progression in careers?
Mentors are extremely important, and I am somebody who has been very fortunate to have some incredible mentors, even here just in Wadsworth. And that in law enforcement, it's so important because, like I said when we were talking about the academy and when we were talking about the field training, is yes, you may be able to understand what it means to read the case law. You may be able to read and understand this policy and procedure, but to actually go out and do it in real life, in real time, it's a lot different than the classroom setting. And so in order to be successful as an officer, you need somebody to be a mentor and a coach. And so that's one of the things I really like in Wadsworth is how we have our field training officers program set up. I had 3 officers. They came from different backgrounds, different experiences, and they were good at different things. And that was what made it special, because instead of just getting paired up with one officer, now you've had 3 positive examples set for you. And you may be able to take this from this officer and this from this officer, and then you put that together, and hopefully you become even a better officer. And you want to just keep recreating that over and over and over. But then even once you get started, I was told when I started, they said, it's going to take years. It's going to take years before you feel comfortable. And when you hear that for the first time, you think there's no way it could take that. But when you think about what an officer really does day in and day out and how much job knowledge they need, whether it's from physical skills or, when can you search something? When do you have probable cause to arrest someone? How do you conduct a complex investigation? It really does take a long time to learn those things. So along the way, if you don't have somebody that's still there guiding you, helping you, pointing you in the right direction, then you're not going to be successful. So, I couldn't sit here and say that, without the mentors here at the Wadsworth Police Department, and so that goes for our DT instructors, our firearms instructors, my field training officers, and then your supervisors, your first line supervisors. They have a huge impact on how you develop and grow as an officer as well too. So the different sergeants that I worked for, and then when you get promoted to sergeant, well, who's guiding and directing you there? Then the lieutenant. And so without these people, setting good examples, without these people, keeping you on track and pushing you to learn more about the law, pushing you to train outside of work. Without that happening, you don't become a successful officer. So I am personally grateful to, again, all those people that have helped shape me as an officer, because they're the ones that put me in this position.
Speaking of the officers, can you help us understand the various ranks within the department?
Sure. So overall, we are staffed for 32 officers. Now, that 32 number includes everybody. That includes administration, detectives.
And how many women would that include?
So right now, about 5.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So it's myself and the lieutenant make up the administration. And then we have 5 first-line supervisors, which for us is the patrol sergeants. So we have 1 sergeant that's assigned to the detective bureau, and then we have 4 road sergeants. So right now, we're actually going through the promotional process. So I came as a sergeant to chief, so we are now in the process of filling that spot. We've got 2 detectives, in addition to the detective bureau supervisor. We've got 2 officers that are assigned as SROs during the school year, so that's their primary function. And then the remainder of that group, that is going to be, essentially, we're a real patrol-oriented department. So the rest of those officers are going to be in that patrol division.
Can you help us understand the interaction between federal, state, and other local police departments, how you work with those to solve crimes and to help out the communities?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up, because you can't, in law enforcement, you're not just an island unto yourself. Crimes are going to span different jurisdictions and different levels. So here in Wadsworth, in Medina County in general, we're lucky to have some real good partners. So we work with the Medina County Sheriff's Office very frequently, but given our position in the county, our geographic location, we work with Norton Police a lot. We may work with Rittman. We may work with Doylestown. And so it's really important to have good, strong relationships with those departments. So, as you mentioned, you may have a crime that doesn't just stop or end here in Wadsworth, or the suspect or suspects may not just live here in the community. We have highway access. We have state routes. People can come into the community from just about anywhere. And then the scope of an investigation. So if we have something here local, we may rely on other agencies to conduct some follow-ups for us. We may rely on them for backup. They may rely on us on backup, depending on the circumstances and situation. And then depending on the scope of the investigation, we have, I was in the Detective Bureau before coming to the Chief's position. We've worked with state-level agencies. We have worked with the FBI. We've worked with the Secret Service. And without those partnerships and without those resources, in some cases, we wouldn't be able to do the job the way we want to, which is to push through the investigation and ultimately end up with an arrest or indictment, or at least answers for the individuals that were involved.
How has technology, and specifically DNA, assisted law enforcement?
So technology has grown, even in just the 11 years that I've been here, it's grown and changed dramatically. And so, DNA is a good example of that. Everybody, I'm sure, has watched whatever their favorite cop drama may be on TV, and I will say, generally speaking, it's not quite the same as what you see on TV. But DNA does play a big role in a lot of cases. I guess what may be important to know for some folks out there that are watching is that we can't use DNA in every case. I mean, obviously there's a tremendous amount of time and cost and lab work that goes into that. So that's not something that we're processing in-house in Wadsworth. That's another good example of being able to use other resources. So in Ohio we have BCI, and that's going to be where these crime labs are located, and they're going to be the ones that are processing it. So they sort of set the guidelines and the rules for submission and what can be submitted when. But of course, if you're talking about an investigation where potential evidence is left behind, that DNA can be very telling. Another one that's changed so much is cell phones. Cell phones, whether it's using that to look at someone's location, or that cell phone could be used to communicate, and that communication could certainly have a major role and an impact in a case. So technology has really changed in the ease of communication, and not just the physical technology, but the app side of technology. So what happens when people communicate on social media? Is that Snapchat? Is that Instagram? Is that Facebook? Is that Twitter? Is that TikTok? And whatever else is going to come out next month that we don't even know about yet, that'll become a popular way of communication. So being able to figure out whether or not you can access that data, what legal processes are required to access that data, all that stuff changes. And that's another good example of, okay, you may learn this in the academy today, but then as these legal cases develop and change, that's why our officers are constantly having to fall back on training and getting them the resources so that they know what to do, because just because you learned this in the academy 10 years ago doesn't mean that's going to be the same 5-10 years down the road. You've got to constantly be engaged in training and what the best training tactics, case law changes. It's all so important.
With the pandemic, we dealing with that on a regular basis now for almost a year and a half. Has crime increased in Wadsworth, stayed the same, or maybe even reduced? What are you seeing? That's
a great question. And as you look back over a several year period of time, one particular pattern doesn't just jump out. You mentioned the pandemic, and so we did see probably the biggest change with the pandemic was sort of the amount of, I'll call it proactive policing. So traffic stops or officers proactively going out and talking to people. Just because of the nature of the pandemic, we were trying to limit interactions with the public, with each other. So that was something that certainly came down. Now, what types of crimes happened also changed a little bit just because of the nature of the pandemic. So you had different businesses that were closed or hours that were reduced. But at the same time, crime just didn't disappear with the pandemic. So we still had property crimes taking place. We still had thefts taking place. We still had domestics taking place, unfortunately. And also mental health related calls as well too. I mean, the pandemic was an extremely stressful time for a lot of people, whether it was financially, socially. So yeah, it's hard to sort of pinpoint any particular trend, and it's interesting to sort of watch how they ebb and flow. But I would say overall, as the community grows, we see a steady increase in calls for service where we're going out to, but trying to track and determine those patterns and individual crimes or types of crimes, it just changes from year to year.
You talked about providing resources for the officers outside and helping out the community. I would imagine that equipment has not gone down in cost over the years, and maybe talk about body cameras, how the Wadsworth Police Department utilize them, and how they actually do protect the officer as well.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in body cameras. When I started, we had the in-car cameras, and that was sort of a good first step in that direction. And I loved having mine, because I'll tell you this, if you're doing your job and you're doing your job in the right way, you treat the public with respect, and you know the right things to do and when to do them, then you can record me all day long. And I think that that's the case here in Wadsworth. I think that's probably important for the community to know, is that that's what makes the Wadsworth Police Department special. It's the people, it's the officers. And so you have a group of officers that genuinely want to be good at their job. You have officers that want to genuinely make an impact in the community. But you also have a group of officers that take it very seriously, that they want to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And that means, whether it's a use of force or just how they interact with the public. And so from that standpoint, absolutely, let's put cameras on that and let's have that available, whether it's documenting evidence of an OVI, for example, being able to watch that interaction and really show, whether it's going to be a judge or a jury, how intoxicated that person was and why that was so serious and why it was important for us to intervene and take them off the road and issue that charge. But it's also a benefit if you're talking about a potential conflict that we've been called to. It's a great way for us to show and demonstrate that, no, we did take the steps to de-escalate. We did try to calm the situation down, but unfortunately the other parties involved didn't, and we had to intervene. And then so being able to go back and review a use of force instance, for example, I think those provide a real asset to us. But to your point, technology prices aren't going down, and the prices of equipment aren't going down. So I think it is important for people to at least consider. It sounds very simple from a policy standpoint, for example, to say, oh, we need to get cops more training, we need to get cops body cameras. Absolutely, we do need those things. But what goes into that? So a body camera itself can be very expensive, but that's not the only component of that. That video has to be stored somewhere, it has to be retained somewhere for records purposes. So where's that server going to be? Is that a service that you're paying the body camera company to provide to you? Is that something that the city is able to do on its own? But there's costs associated with that. Everybody that's had electronics know that electronics break or things go wrong in them. So are there service plans associated with this? What are the replacement costs of that? And that's not the only piece of technology that we have. Think about all the equipment that an officer has on their belt. Tasers, for example. It's critical to have that less lethal option for officers. But that equipment price has gone up too as that technology has changed. Bulletproof vests, all the equipment that goes into it, those prices steadily increase. And it's unfortunate. It's something that we have to deal with, and it's a challenge that's not unique just to our agency, but law enforcement across the country. Even from a records management standpoint, we all have to do reports. All these calls that we go to, all these things that we're talking about, use of force and everything else, they all have to get documented. So how does that get documented? Well, we have to have a report management system. That costs money. How do we share those reports with the prosecutor's office? There's other components, and it just continues to layer and layer. And as that technology, it grows and changes, and it certainly helps us. Body cameras are a great example. Do I want body cameras? Absolutely. Do we have body cameras? Absolutely. But it is important to, at least in the back of your mind, know that there is a cost associated with that.
How does Wadsworth go about recruiting new officers? We heard an article recently on NPR that is very, very difficult now to get law enforcement fulfilled in some communities. Mm-hmm.
No, and that's not just a challenge that we face. It's a challenge that's happening across the country right now. So we are a civil service setup. So the first step in our process is going to be that test. So in order to attract as many people as possible, we take all the basic steps, just like anybody else who's out there hiring right now. We're going to put ads on social media, ads on Indeed and websites like that, and try to get the word out that way. Here recently, we've had a lot of success with sending officers to actual police academies if they'll allow us to make a presentation about the department, make sure people know when the test is. We have reached out to academy commanders throughout the state. They a lot of times will maintain lists of the men and women that have come through their academies that are looking to get hired, and they can send those emails out for us and really try to get as many people as we can in the door. I mean, just as an example, when I took the test in Wadsworth, 11 years ago, well, I guess it was probably 12 when you add in the hiring process there was about 200 people in the room. And now it's not uncommon to see tests in the 60s or 70s. And if that's the number you start with and you say, okay, well, who passed the test? Great. Who can pass the interview process? Great. And this list is getting smaller and smaller.
Right,
and then and we want to say, somebody asked me the other day, what's important for you when you're hiring an officer? What are you looking for? Are you looking for a particular background or person? And my answer was, it's integrity. Where they came from or what their experience is, while that is certainly important, what's law enforcement about? Law enforcement is about trust. You need to have the trust of the community. We need to be able to trust each other. And without that, you don't have anything. So the background component of this process is going to be so important as well. So we're going to talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors, teachers, past employers. We're going to, ask you about certain things and experiences that you had, and because of that trust and because of that integrity, there's certain things that if you've done or participated or we get that feedback from other people in your life that maybe you're not a good fit, then hey, that's important that we don't take that person, because they're going to have a lot of trust and they're going to have a lot of authority. So,
and you could be with that officer, you could be tied to that officer for decades, and you certainly want the best candidate out there.
Exactly. It's like inviting somebody into your family. It really is, because like I said, earlier on in the interview, what makes us special, it's not me. It's not one particular person, but it is the men and women that collectively make up the department. It's their skill sets, it's their abilities, it's their talents, and it's their care. It's their drive to really want to help the community. That's what makes us special. So when you think about the responsibility of inviting somebody into that family, you have to take that very seriously, because to your point, if you have somebody that you brought in and it's not the right person, well, then that can have an impact on the organization. So recruitment is difficult, and again, it's not something that's unique to us. And when you start with 200, hey, maybe you can whittle down and you make it. But when you start with 65, 70, that changes how that process looks.
How do you keep with the commentary in the state and in our community and in our country, how do you keep morale high?
That's a great question. And so this is something that I think is unique to Wadsworth. And when I was in the Detective Bureau, you get to work with a lot of other agencies, other departments, and sometimes they're coming to us for help too. And we've had some people come in and they've made comments and they said, I saw we support the police signs in some people's front yards down here, and that was striking to them. And so you've got this dichotomy going on, right? Because if you look at the news, and I'm not trying to make any statements one way or the other, but if you look at what's in the news, there is certainly a certain portrayal of law enforcement and the relationship with the community right now. There is a very specific certain picture that is being painted at a national level. But our community is unique. We have, for example, Main Street Wadsworth. They have the First Friday events downtown in the square. And they had First Responder First Friday. That wasn't us putting the event on. That was actually our community saying, hey, can you guys come down here? We want to recognize you. You have people that have the support your police signs in their front yard. We have people stopping by saying, hey, we bought you guys a case of Gatorade. We want to drop it off. Hey, we got together and made you cookies. Or, hey, here's some, and it sounds like a stereotype, here's some donuts, which, hey, I love donuts. That's a thing. That's okay. But we have people in the community that they write us cards. And so we have this unique situation going on here where we do feel supported, but we're not insulated from that rest of what's going on across the country. And so it is difficult at times for officers to see, news stories where law enforcement is really portrayed in a negative light, or people question our role. Are we doing the right thing? And when they care about it so much, that's hard. Or even when you see your own friends and family on social media reposting these articles or saying, you know, why are the cops doing this, that, and the other? It is hard. And so what do you have to get back to? You have to get back to why you wanted to do the job in the first place. You want to have an impact on your community. You really want to help people. In a very simplistic term, you want to catch the bad guys. You want to keep people safe. And if you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're taking your training seriously, and you carry yourself with honor, you carry yourself with dignity, you treat the community with respect, and you do a good job at what you're expected to do, then at the end of the day, you know, we collectively need to say, all right, despite what the narrative is, despite what's going on, we are doing the right thing, and we work and live in a community that supports us. And again, it's a dichotomy, it's a balance. But we are very fortunate to be a part of this community and have this community that in most cases really has our backs, and we appreciate that.
Chief Chafin, congratulations again.
Thank you.
On your post, and we will have to bring you back after a little while, after you get into the nitty-gritty and develop, again, relationship with a lot of people, and certainly the schools are a big part
Absolutely.
of that.
Yep.
And we'll have Dr. Hill on next week, as
Awesome.
a matter of fact, and talking to him about the many aspects of the upcoming school year. Thanks for viewing Bruce on the Loose.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.